Terrible, violent day on day 11 of the Israel-Hamas war, a second major violent incident in the conflict which has left the world divided. Hours before US President Joe Biden was to touch down in Israel, a massive explosion ripped through the Al-Ahli hospital in Gaza, or that's what the Palestinian authorities are claiming. Who bombed the hospital? Who is responsible? Was it pre-planned? Was it sabotage? Was it a false flag operation? There are no easy answers in this, and it shows up in the kind of responses one has seen globally. At present, the world seems divided about how to respond and how to fix responsibility. But two sides, Israel and Palestine, are unequivocal in their individual stand. Palestine has said that the bombing was done by the Israel Defense Forces and ended up killing at least 500 civilians, most of them women, children, and those who were severely ill. Israel, for its part, has now released a series of pieces of evidence to say, 1, we didn't do it, 2, the Hamas fired a rocket that misfired and ended up damaging the hospital, and 3, that Palestine and its allies are now carrying out a large-scale disinformation war against Israel.
I want to give you an announcement of the event that occurred in the hospital in Gaza. I can confirm that an analysis of the IDF operational systems indicates that a barrage of rockets was fired by terrorists in Gaza, passing in close proximity to the Al-Ahli al-Ma'adi hospital in Gaza at the time it was hit. Intelligence from few sources that we have in our hands indicates that the Islamic Jihad is responsible for the failed rocket launch which hit the hospital in Gaza. At 6:15 p.m., a barrage of rockets was fired by Hamas to Israel. Then, at 6:59 p.m., a barrage of around 10 rockets was fired by Islamic Jihad from a nearby cemetery. It was at the time that 6:59 p.m. when there were reports of an explosion at the Al-Ahli al-Mahadani hospital in Gaza City. According to our intelligence, Hamas checked the reports, understood it was an Islamic Jihad rocket that had misfired, and decided to launch a global media campaign to hide what really happened. They went as far as inflating the numbers of casualties. They understood with absolute certainty that it was a rocket misfired by Islamic Jihad that damaged the hospital. No structural damage. The walls stay intact. No craters. These are the characterized that shows that not an aerial ammunition that have hit the parking lot. The size of the damage we see here is due to the warhead of the Islamic Jihad rocket, but most of the rocket's propellant is still evident due to the short flight of the rocket because the launch failed.
It's a battle for public opinion and public perception. So let's first take a look at 3 pieces of visual evidence that Israel has released so far and what they show us. First up are the pictures that Israel has released from the car parking just outside of the Al-Ahli hospital in Gaza. Take a look at these pictures of what it looked like before and after. What is the purpose of these pictures? It's very simple. First, to say that in the pictures before the purported rocket strike, you can see what the car parking looks like. And even after the bombing took place, there is not too much of damage to the parking itself. Most of the cars standing there also are not physically damaged, while there is a large amount of debris which coats the entire area. Barring 4 or 5 vehicles, if you take a look at the rest of the cars which are there, they largely seem intact. Their body seems intact. The second piece of visual evidence that we are talking about is the buildings in the area. Now, the argument is that if there was such a high impact strike were to happen, then the entire area would be flattened out. However, the pictures from the 15th of October, which is before the strike, and the 17th of October, which is after the strike, show that several buildings, one is a shed, the other one is with a tiled roof, they continue to stand. They largely remain intact. What has changed are some shrapnel pieces, etc., which can be seen on rooftops, but the buildings remain standing and the roofs also remain largely intact. The third piece of evidence is that of past bombings by the Israel Defense Force, by the Israel Air Force. The pictures of that, the aftermath of the bombing, has been released. Now, what do they say? They say when we actually did carry out an aerial strike, take a look at how deep the craters were that were left behind. They were big in diameter and in depth, as opposed to the pictures which can be seen of the building and the car park and the adjoining areas where there is no crater visible. The argument being given is that this all goes to bolster their claim that this wasn't munition used by the Israeli Defense Forces. There are no craters. There isn't the kind of damage that you would have seen if indeed Israel decided to bomb this hospital. But it didn't end there. In addition to all of this, Israel has also released the audio clip of a purported phone conversation between two men. The men are Hamas operatives, and they can be heard reacting with horror and disbelief to the damage caused by Hamas rockets misfiring. But Palestine, understandably, is saying it's hogwash, it's cooked up, and must be soundly debunked.
بس بقول لك أول مرة بنشوف الصاروخ زي هيك والشظايا هذه، فبقول لك تبع الجهاد، صواريخ الجهاد الإسلامي يعني. فهم بيقولوا تعاون الجهاد الإسلامي. شكله من عين بيحكوا إن الشظايا تبعت الصاروخ إنه شظايا محلية مش زي شظايا عاد هذول تلاقيهم من المقدرة اللي دي بفلك محط فيهم. ايش ده؟ بتلاقيهم طالعين من المقبرة اللي ورا المستشفى المعمداني دي اللي هو فسه ونزل عندهم. المعمداني يقول لك عند الساحة بالضبط. أول ما تدخل على الساحة تدخلش على البلد، عيدك اليمين في مستشفى المعمداني.
He is a liar. His spokesperson and digital spokesperson tweeted that Israel did the hit, thinking that there is around this hospital a base for Hamas, and then he deleted that tweet. We have a copy of that tweet. Now they change the story to try to blame the Palestinians. The Israeli spokesperson of the army about a week ago made a statement in which he said, evacuate the hospitals. Their intentions is evacuate or hospitals will be hit, and they are responsible for that crime, and they cannot fabricate stories to deal with it.
ما جرى هذه الليلة فاجعة كبيرة ومجزرة حرب بشعة لا يمكن السكوت عنها أو أن نجعلها تمر. اتخذوا عشرات القرارات للحماية الدولية لشعبنا ولم يطبقوها لأن أمريكا لا تريد أن تطبقها. هذا العدوان على أبناء شعبنا يجب أن يتوقف، وهذه الجرائم يجب أن تتوقف. لن نسمح بنكبة جديدة في القرن 21، ولن نقبل بأن يهجر شعبنا مرة أخرى. شعبنا سيبقى صامدا على أرض وطنه، ولن نرحل ولن نرحل ولن نرحل.
The competing claims aside, protests have now broken out against Israel, especially in the Muslim world, with violent scenes being witnessed in Jordan, where people clashed with the police. Beirut, Baghdad and Tehran were also pretty much the same. The US and UK so far have supported Israel's version so far, but the question is, till how long?
I was deeply saddened and outraged by the explosion at the hospital in Gaza yesterday. And based on what I've seen, it appears as though it was done by the other team, not you. But there's a lot of people out there not sure. So we've got to overcome a lot of things.
Both sides have taken their own version, and the world is being asked to choose. Kamal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary of India, is joining us along with Dr. Shani Moore, former Director of Foreign Policy, Israel Government, Issa Amro, activist in Palestine. But my first question is to somebody who's not taken either side. Thomas Rose, former Senior Advisor and Chief Strategist to the US Vice President, former publisher and CEO of the Jerusalem Post. Thomas Rose, you've seen both the versions. Whose version seems more plausible to you at present?
Seems more plausible, not just to me, but anybody who looks at the evidence, is this was a Palestine Islamic Jihad failed launch. The Israeli Defense Force has provided forensic evidence of that fact, and all we hear from Hamas and the PLO are calumnies and accusations. Why the world media and so many people around the world would immediately and at absolute face value take what a genocidal terrorist organization says as fact and print it, cut it, and paste it. I mean, this happened in the U.S., the Wall Street Journal, they supposedly, very conservative pro-Israel newspaper, basically cut and pasted the Hamas press release as their lead headline. And the Israelis weren't very quick getting out. They should have been quicker to get out. But the other argument is if there was a call by Israel to evacuate the hospital, why didn't they? Why shouldn't they have? There is a war now that was started by Hamas that Israel will continue to prosecute until its objectives are achieved. This whole thing is a nightmare.
I mean,
it's going to get.
If I may just stop you for a second. It's not about copy pasting Hamas propaganda, but the fact is that there were very troubling images of people who are injured, who were seen mortally wounded, little children who were bloodied. Everyone reacted viscerally. And there were doctors there who said, this has been done by Israel.
Well, the Wall Street Journal, for instance, and then I'll be quiet and let others speak, the headline was, Israel attacks Gaza hospital, 500 Palestinians killed. We have no verification of the death count. We have no forensic evidence from the Palestinians that this was an Israeli attack. The Israeli Israeli response has been backed up by forensic evidence, and let people dispute that.
Okay. Let me bring in Issa Amro. Issa Amro, the Israel Air Force has now released a video where they are saying, and I quote, attached is video footage from the morning hours of the hospital in Gaza City, which was hit by a failed launch of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorist organization. It can be seen that the damage as a result of the failed launch of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad is in the parking lot area adjacent to the hospital and is not similar to an attack crater. It can also be seen that buildings next to the hospital are not damaged. What they're essentially saying, after showing video of today morning, is that the hospital hasn't even been affected. It's only the parking lot, it's only the adjacent areas. The main building is intact.
Okay, thank you very much. And it's very important to be very critical about reporting and to be sure from all sides of what's going on about this war. First, Israeli military has a history of flying when they see international attention about any kind of killing in the West Bank. I worked for a very long time in documenting Israeli human rights violations in Hebron, and I was working with an Israeli human rights organization. I want to remind you and remind the audience of the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh in Jenin. She was shot, she was killed by the Israeli military, and Israel, denied that they were responsible about her killing, and they blamed the Jenin, Jenin people that they shot her. This is one side. And in the beginning of the war, Israel officially announced, and many leaders and many media agencies said that Hamas members beheaded babies, and everybody talked about it. Then when we...
Mr. Amro, we will come to the babies in just a second. I want to focus your attention specifically on the images that have been released by the Israeli Air Force, which shows the main building intact and the parking lot singed, not even completely damaged. There is no crater there. I'm
coming to that.
Yes.
So who lies about the babies, about Shireen Abu Akleh, about many other things? I can give you 100 examples about army lying about their human rights violations, about their war crimes. Then let's come to the hospitals. Hamas and Islamic Jihad, they have handmade rockets, very small explosion in the rockets. And the explosion scale is much smaller to kill 500 people, much smaller than
But they're disputing that 500 is dead. That death toll is being disputed by Israel.
No, something else very important. I saw the explosion of the people who were fleeing from the north to the south in the safe path Israel announced. It's exactly the same, almost the same images. You will see the explosion and you will see 60, 70 people dead without any real, holes, without any evidence for that kind of rocket. So until now, we, as Palestinians, blame Israeli airstrikes for doing it. All the evidence they showed, I'm not convinced until now it's Hamas or Islamic Jihad. For us, it's only the Israeli military missiles which can do that much damage and that much killing.
Mr. Amro, again, I would want to draw your attention back to a very specific claim that is being made, where the Israeli Air Force has released the picture today morning of the same hospital, and they are saying this hospital building is still standing. The parking lot is the one that has seen damage. They have also released drone footage of the same. Are you saying that this imagery is fake, falsified?
Yes. The Israeli military can't be the source of information about killing civilians, because they are targeting hospitals, they are targeting civilians, they are warning hospitals to be evacuated. Why they, warn hospitals to be evacuated? And the same hospital, on October 14th, they got two smaller bombs from the Israeli military. You can go to their website and you will see the damage the Israeli airstrikes, caused in the hospital. So,
okay, Mr. Rose, quickly responding, then I want to bring in Dr. Moore.
Evacuated.
Mr. Rose, quickly respond, then Dr. Shani Moore. Mr. Rose, you wanted to respond?
Yes, the charge that Israel targets civilians is a despicable, disgusting lie. Israel does not target civilians. There's no benefit or value, not to mention the notion that it's utterly and totally contrary to the Israeli Defense Force vision on how to conduct wars, the purity of arms, which is the sacred concept of the Israeli army. And that's one of the reasons there's such hatred of Jews and the state of Israel, because its army is so humane. Perhaps if it were more barbaric, Israel would get a better better treatment in the press, but that's not the way Israel behaves. And I think the attitude on the ground in Israel right now is they don't give a damn what anybody else says about how they should best protect their citizens and their interests from these barbaric genocidal murderers that murdered 1,400 Israeli civilians last Saturday.
But is that what is acting against Israel? Dr. Shani Moore, one, the perception that we really don't owe any explanation to anyone. We are doing whatever is needed to protect our civilians. And three, as Issa Amro argues, why should anyone believe images that are released by the Israeli army? He's calling them possibly doctored.
I feel very sorry for Issa Amro. He's a very smart guy, but you brought him here to defend an absolutely untenable position. And he's made several accusations here which are demonstrably false. First, regarding Shireen Abu Akleh, the Israeli army didn't categorically deny. It said that it needed to do a forensic analysis of it. It was very hard to get cooperation from the Palestinians on it. And when there was a forensic analysis, it was the Israeli army that had actually said that it had been a operational mistake of the IDF, that the bullet came from an IDF soldier. Absolutely, though, nobody serious ever thought that she had been assassinated or targeted. She was caught in the crossfire. Regarding the children and the beheading, this became a very macabre debate online. All that was claimed was that in one kibbutz, 40 children were killed, and that there had been cases where 40 babies had been killed, and there had been cases where a baby had been beheaded. This was inflated by other people claiming that the Israelis had lied and said there were 40, and the Israeli authorities themselves later released photos showing that the claim that was made was absolutely true. Very weird to hold either of those things on account. You guys gave a very forensic analysis. Mr. Amro has discussed the impact there, but of course, all we've seen in the impact is a damaged parking lot, entirely consistent with a failed rocket launch. In every previous round of Gaza-Israeli fighting, roughly 20% and sometimes more of rockets from Palestinian Islamic Jihad or Hamas have fallen short and hit Gaza. There'd be nothing extraordinary about that happening here. The small fire that erupted from the failed rocket also is entirely consistent with it, because it's the propellant fuel, which has not been burned because the rocket didn't get anywhere near its target. In all these cases, but what's more is that Mr. Amro doesn't just claim that this is an Israeli munition that caused the damage in the parking lot, which is false, and doesn't just claim that this strike killed 500 people, which is false. He claims something, and I think Mr. Rose hit on this a bit obliquely. He claims that Israel deliberately targeted a hospital. For that, you have to have an absolutely diabolical mindset about what Israel is. Why would Israel want to deliberately target a hospital? What contribution could that make to the Israeli effort now? The Israelis are being watched, unfairly watched, in every war that we have conducted for any evidence that we've done something wrong. The IDF takes every conceivable step to limit the civilian damage from any of its. And in that situation, with President Biden about to arrive, in Mr. Amro's imagination, that would be when someone in the IDF decides is the best time to strike a hospital. The last bit of evidence he brings is the call to evacuate. The call to evacuate was part of the larger call to evacuate the northern part of Gaza, precisely because that is now a war zone. And in order to minimize civilian casualties, the best thing that can be done is to evacuate that area. Why is it a war zone? Because more than 2,000 Hamas fighters breached the border, entered Israel, and slaughtered over 1,400 people, murdering entire families, taking pleasure in doing it, live streaming their exploits, sending pictures to friends to cheer on while they murdered their children in front of their parents, while they raped, while they kidnapped. And that is not a question of did they target or didn't they target. That was the entire point of what they did.
Okay, let him answer the limited point that you have raised. Why would Israel do it? What do they stand to gain, especially 12 hours before Joe Biden's to touch down? Issa Amro.
Yes. Israel is warning many hospitals to evacuate specific hospitals. They call them and they ask them to leave. So the injured people don't have a place to be treated. Not only Al-Ahli Hospital was warned to be evacuated by the army. Why the army is warning hospitals specifically?
Why would Israel bomb a hospital? By any stretch of the imagination, nobody would say, great job done.
Yeah, but they do it. They pumped many houses full of civilians. Until now, more than 1,300 Palestinian children were killed in the war. So many civilians lost their lives.
So you're saying they're just doing it because of sadism? They're just doing it because they like bombing hospitals?
No, it's not about they like bombing hospitals. They don't reach to that point. Israel is trying to revenge from Gaza. I call it's a kind of price tag. As the Israeli settlers in West Bank, they have a strategy and a campaign, they call it price tag. So they attack the Israeli settlers, they attack Palestinians when they disagree with the Israeli government. Now, the Israeli government...
So you're saying that this was a revenge strike on a hospital?
It's a price tag. They want to make any kind of attacks in the future on Israeli civilians, which we all disagree with. We are not, justifying.
Okay, so you're saying this is a revenge strike. Before Dr. Shani Moore responds, Mr. Sibal, as a dispassionate observer, who do you think is winning in the court of public opinion as of yet? Has Israel's evidence done enough to convince people of what really happened?
Look, the Western world is behind Israel, and they will obviously take Israel at its word. And since they have presented some evidence, and that will be taken seriously. And we've seen that President Biden has made this statement that he thinks that it appears that the other side has done that, which I'm a bit surprised at the language he used. He didn't say very affirmatively that the other side has done it. He said based on what the evidence that he's been given to him, it appears that it has been done by the other side, but leave that aside. However, the Arab world, the Muslim in Europe and in the United States, the Muslim street, if you like, they will not buy the Israeli narrative. So if you ask me the question whether Israel has won the narrative, I would say no.
But will it become bigger? Because now Iran is saying, cut off their power supplies, cut off their oil supplies. The whole Muslim world should unite against Israel. Is this going to get bigger and sabotage the peace process, especially with the Saudis? Is it over now? Is it done?
No. The Iranian foreign minister has just visited Saudi Arabia. I think he's gone today to Saudi Arabia. So they are coordinating. They want to make sure that whatever Iran does or whatever it sees in terms of the perspectives of how this is going to unfold, it should not be something which then pits them against Saudi Arabia. So therefore, they are coordinating, or at least they're developing some kind of an understanding on what should happen next, what lies ahead, what should the Islamic world do in order to prevent this conflict from expanding further. So I don't think that the peace process between Saudi Arabia and Iran is over. That is one. The other is that Saudi Arabia...
The relations between Saudi and Israel.
Oh,
is that entire process over now?
Well, for the time being, yes. Because the Saudis and the UAE, they have to be very concerned about the Arab street. They have a vision of what they want to do in terms of stabilizing the Middle East, its economic development, involving Israel, because Israel can bring in a lot of technology and other assets that they have in terms of development. They have 2030 plans of modernizing these countries. They want to move away from terrorism. As you know, the Saudis have absolutely no time for Hamas. They intensely detest these people. It is basically Qatar and Turkey who are behind them, and Iran, of course, supports them. But Saudi Arabia does not, UAE does not, and their statements, if you look at them very carefully, they're not blistering statements. They're keeping the doors open, and they will like the things to hopefully subside.
Until yesterday, though, because yesterday both UAE and Saudi Arabia were unequivocal in their condemnation for what they called is the bombing of a hospital by Israel. They were apportioning blame.
Yes, but condemnation is one thing which they have to. In any case, look, whoever is at fault, the fact is that the hospital seems to have been targeted, and the Israeli says that the Islamic Jihad has done that. The Arab world thinks that the Israelis have done that. So unless there is an impartial international investigation on the spot, we'll never know the truth. It just, if you are on the Israeli side, you'll believe them. If you're against Israel, you will not believe them. And the Saudis and the UAE, because they went ahead, at least UAE established diplomatic relations with Israel. And Saudi Arabia was about to normalize relations with Israel. This having happened and the Arab street being up in flames, they have to say this. This is the minimum they have to say. But I think they will come back to normality of some sorts, but it will be delayed.
All right. It will take some time. Dr. Shaney Moore, the allegation is this is pure revenge attack because Israel is bound to do it. That's the argument being given by Issa Amro. That's what you stand to gain, revenge.
Issa Amro is a very smart man with a very long public record who's done a lot of good things. If he genuinely believes that a group of generals sat around and plotted to bomb a hospital, that they brought it to a cabinet and senior politicians agreed to it, that people discussed this, planned this, and all managed to coordinate, and nobody opposed it, and none of this leaked out, then he knows absolutely nothing about Israel and absolutely nothing about war.
Well, the unfortunate truth is that lives have been lost. At least that's the claim so far being made by the Palestinian health authorities. The unfortunate truth also is that in a war, people suffer. Let's hope the truth gets out there. For the time being, for joining with your wisdom, thanks very much, all gentlemen.